Welcome to the DataPoint pivot table instructions. What I'm going to do is show you how to utilize the output from DataPoint and put it into an Excel pivot table and get a fairly formal output table quite quickly. So the data that come from DataPoint are going to be in two comma delimited files. One will have the vegetation data and the other will have the site data. And I'll just open this up right now. But just so you know, there's also a form file, a comma delimited file, that'll have the growth form information. And as well, there is the species list comma delimited file. And what I've done is I've put all of these into a single Excel file. But first let me show you how opening up the data file works. Simply by right-clicking and saying Open with Microsoft Excel, you can get the data to come into an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm going to modify all the column widths so you can read everything. So just click in the upper left-hand corner, come to any one of these columns, double-click, and it'll expand it to the right width. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that now, and I'm going to move over to the combine. So what I've done is I've opened up those Excel, those comma delimited files, and just brought them into different worksheets on a single Excel spreadsheet. So I've got veg data here, I've got site data here, and once again I'll show you how to just expand that so you can read everything easily. I have the species list. We won't really need that, but you can sort of get a look at what it's like. And then the growth form, and we will need to incorporate that. So the first thing we do is just put your cursor in the upper left hand corner, and what we're going to do is create a pivot table. A pivot table will take this flat file of data and then turn it into a table with samples across the top and species along the left. So to do that, you go to the Insert tab and you'll find Pivot Table there. You'll say Pivot Table, and it asks you to define the data range, and as you can see, it automatically selects it. So you're just ready to say OK. And then what you have over here are a list of the data fields. And what I'm going to do is put those, so form, so that's the growth form, and then I'm going to put in scientific name. So we have now is a list sorted by growth form, and then within each growth form we have the species that occur in that growth form listed alphabetically. Now I'm going to include the stand data into the columns. So there's our different sample stands, and then we have the data are organized by first hit and second hit. And what we have here, so stand 1, here's all the first hit false, so that would be something like second hits, and then first hit true. And what I really want to do is reverse the order of these, so I can come over to first hit, right click, actually I don't want to right click, I just want to click it, click this little drop down box and sort Z to A, so reverse sorting. So now we see we have the true first and false second, but we still don't have the data in here. So I'll come down to value, place that in here, and notice that it says sum of value. If you happen to get something that says count of data, you would change that here. You can change it to count or average, that sort of thing. So it came in as sum right off the bat. And notice that I've got a lot of 0.1, and when I collect data I put in 0.1 when the species is present but doesn't really contribute to cover. So you can see that for each growth form those values add up. And you may not want to do that. You may not want to put in 0.1 values, and I can show you how to change those 0.1 values into zeros so that only the full cover values will accumulate. So down here at the bottom we have our grand total. So for each sample we've got the grand total, and then if you needed it, over here on the right we've got the summaries on the right. So for that particular growth form, the combined value for all the different samples was 50.1. So there's a lot of data here that you can use. Now this sum, so for each sample stand, you've got a value over here that is kind of redundant. So just put your cursor there, right click, and then when you click this, notice that all these columns will disappear. So the subtotal for stand will just disappear. So now you've just got sample 1 true false, sample 2. Notice that sample 2 only has true, so there weren't any second hits on sample 2. And what you can do is come over to first hits, go to field settings, layout and print, and then see this show items with no data? Watch the two above. When I click that and click OK, I've got true and false, so it sort of makes the table a whole lot symmetrical. So we've got that done, and what you want to do is be able to take it out of a pivot table and just turn it into something that you can modify. So what I do is I just grab everything, don't include this very top line, but grab, oh, and there is one more thing we can do. We can add common name. So let's add common name. Now notice how it's a subset under the scientific name. We can change that by going to field settings, layout and print, and then click show items in tabular form, and I think that will fix it. And then we've got this total again. We don't really want that total, so we'll click none. So there's two things you have to do. So now we've got the scientific name, the common name, all the stands arrayed across to the right, and then that first hit, second hit information. So now what we'll do is we'll grab these data. Oops, a little too far. We'll copy them, and then we'll just paste them into a blank spreadsheet. Now we've got just raw data that we can work with. So what I'm going to do is select everything, change the column widths so it looks a little bit better. And then at this point you can start formatting all you want. What I'm also going to do is show you how you can replace this value with the actual growth form by using the growth form lookup table. So what I've done is I've highlighted the information in the growth form, and I'm going to turn this into a lookup table just by giving it a name. We're just going to call it form lookup. Now we can come back over here, whoops, wrong one, sheet, and it's probably good to rename this, and then you'll know what you're looking for. So this worksheet is now renamed data table. So what we're going to do is put in a logical formula, and it's going to say if this value over here is numeric, if is numeric, and it's going to be that B6, then what we're going to do is do a vertical lookup of B6 in the lookup table, which was called form lookup, and you can see that sort of pops up right away. And what we're going to want is the item in the second column, which was the long form, and then I think you put in false to tell it to not put in anything else, and then that's if it's true. And then if that value isn't numeric, in other words if it's one of those text values, we're going to put in nothing. And of course that didn't work. So the formula should be if is number, not is numeric. So if is number B6, and then we do a vertical lookup of that numeric value in the lookup table, return from the second column, and we're ready to go. So now we can just drag that down. And what that's going to do is look up the equivalent of what those numbers stand for. So now I'm going to convert that from a formula into just its values. And then I can just come down here and delete these, and we've got the growth form title placed in the proper location. So there are ways to automate a lot of these things, and you probably have your own way of doing it and the way you want to organize things that may be a lot less complicated. And then you may want to bold the bottom text, and then notice that each one of the growth forms has the summary values just for that growth form. So you may want to bold some of those just so they stand out. And then you can do all kinds of vertical lines, horizontal lines. What I will often do is put in just horizontal lines. Along the bottom. And so you can get things to look the way you like. Now, I mentioned that there might be a way to get rid of these point ones, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to save what I have. I'm going to go back into the veg data, and where you see all these point ones, what I'm going to do is just replace them all. I'm going to replace all the 0.1 with just a lowercase p, which would stand for present, and then that won't add up in any calculations. And then just for simplicity, I'm going to center it so we can see it better. Okay, now I'm going to do another pivot table. And I'm not certain it's going to work. We'll give it a shot. So I'm going to put my cursor here in the upper left. I'm going to insert pivot table. Come through with the same sort of process. I'm going to put in form here. I'm going to put in scientific. I'm going to put in common. And then remember, on the scientific, I went into field settings, and I said I don't do that. I don't put in subtotals, and I show the items in tabular form. And then I bring in stand and first hit. And remember, on the first hit, I sort Z to A, and then finally the values. And this is where I'm not certain it's going to work. And it looks like I have to redo that because it's still pulling in the 0.1. So I think it defined that data range, and I'll have to undefine it. And probably the best way to do that is just delete the pivot table. So what I'm going to do is just delete this. Sorry about that. And I'm going to delete this other pivot table. And I am going to try to do it one more time. So we're going to insert pivot table. It's now redefined everything. We're going to go in with growth form, scientific name, common name, modify the items on scientific name, add the stand and the first hit, And then let's see if we get lucky this time. And that's count, so I don't think it's going to work. We want some. It did work. So you just have to delete that first pivot table. So now you have a 0 where something was there but not an equivalent to 1. So you can see you have situations where you do have some cover value. For instance, there, and you've got plenty of cover values across here, but the zeros will tell you something was there, but it did not come to the total of at least 1%. You can see that the columns start adding up better. Okay, then we wanted to get rid of this, and we wanted to reverse, let's see, on the first hits, go to the field settings, and we wanted to show items with no data, and then we also wanted to reverse the order. So now we've got true and false. So I'm going to bring that a little bit tighter so you can sort of see how it works. So true false goes with sample 1. Then once again I'm going to go through that process of turning this into a real table. And I'm just going to paste it in here. Okay, so once again we would do an insert, put a column here, put in that formula, add our growth form categories, and then things like this can be merged and centered so you can tell that it's associated with those. Then you can just copy the format, drag it all the way to the end, and then they'll all be centered. And then you can put in your vertical lines and horizontal lines to your liking. So hopefully that gives you a start on how to get some sort of table quickly prepared. Sure beats all that typing. There are a few steps that you would have to get used to, but hopefully it allows you to just take your data and immediately have something you can present. So thank you very much.